Evolutionary Underground episode 29 coming your way. Today's going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about Equipoise Bulk with Geneza Pharma. So Geneza Pharma is the GP brand. You guys have probably heard of it, but if you haven't, one of the most excellent brands out there in the world. And many professionals use the GP brand. They depend on the GP brand to get them where they want to go. I use it. Mobster with his powerlifting, grip champion, he's used it and he uses them and he loves them as well. And he's going to talk about that in a second. But look, right now, there is so much underdose and fake gear going around. And people are using anabolic steroids and they're using 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams, even more because they're using underdose stuff. So when you use underdose stuff, you got to keep jacking up the dose to get the proper amount in your system. It's like making lemonade and not putting enough lemon in there. You just have to keep adding more and more lemon after it's made. And that's not right. So now you end up paying 4 or 5 times what you should pay to get the same amount in your system. Well, GP, their prices are competitive. That's one of the things I love about their prices. They're extremely competitive and they have the absolute best prices that you'll find. They're competitive. And really their GP Equipoise, which we're going to talk about here, Mobster and I were talking about in the pre-show, it's less expensive for a vial of that than it would be to buy testosterone from most other brands. And if you buy in bulk, you save even more money. The more you buy, the more you save. So they have really good opportunities if you want to stock up and buy 5 vials, 10 vials, 20 vials. The more you buy, the less the cost per vial. So they make it really easy for you to save money and use that extra money that you save on other steroids, on your PCT, on your ancillaries and all that stuff. So in this podcast, we're going to kind of go over Equipoise. We're going to go over the history, the bulking, how to dose it, how to cycle it. We're going to talk about dieting on it. We're going to talk about side effects and all that good stuff on it. But then we bring in Mobster to touch on GP and why he loves the Geneza Pharma brand.
I'm just thinking, I'm going to echo a couple of sentiments of yours, Steve. And I'll just give you an example. Okay. So a buddy of mine was comparing something he got from someone else with something that's probably from one of our approved sources, Steve. And he said, and I quote, I could feel the difference as soon as I used it. That's the kind of quality, that's the level, that's the potency that you want. I'm also reminded, and I made notes as Steve was talking, as we quite often do when we do these shows, we've just had a bunch of test results. I'm not going to get into specifics here, Steve, but a bunch of test results of all our approved sources by one member on the forums. And every single one of the approved sources, including Geneza, came across really well. What Steve said is unbelievably true. And it's so frustrating. In this day and age, Steve, I can't understand why people, it doesn't make no sense to me to scam people. It really doesn't, because you grab their money to begin with and then you lose their money long term. And the reason why we have approved sources exactly like Geneza Pharma, Steve, is because these companies have been around for ages and they're producing solid products with great tests. And we know specifically, I can say this specifically, like Steve just said, not just myself, not just Steve, but other people on the forums, hundreds of members who've used this product or this product or this product. And the feedback again and again and again is positive. The reviews will be 5-star. That's exactly why we want products like Geneza Pharma EQ out there doing its thing. We want solid products that are going to give us the results that we're looking for. If we train our asses off, Steve, if we, like today, bulk, do our nutrition properly, if we put the rest of recovery in, we want the performance enhancing drugs, the PEDs, to do their job. And we want a trusted, solid product, potent as it should be. Like Steve said, it's a false economy if you think you're buying something and then it's underdosed, because essentially you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. You've saved $10 or $15, but you haven't, because you've ended up having to buy 2 amps or 2 vials or another bunch of pills, and they're underdosed. So you go, oh, look, let me tell you a very quick side story, guys. And I've mentioned this on previous shows. So I've literally had free Dynabol given to me way back in the day. Used it, I think it was for like 10 days, Steve, at least a week, and nothing. And then I'd gone and got an approved sources product and started the approved sources product on a Friday. And by Monday, I'd put on £4. So what was I using up to that point, Steve? Probably nothing, blanks, either super low dose or nothing in it whatsoever. Just literally, might as well have been a sugar pill. And then from the Friday to the Monday, the £4 was a properly dosed Dianabol pill. This is the difference between low dose, poor products, non-approved sources, and using approved sources, properly dosed, properly tested, certificates of analysis. And again, and I've touched on this as well, Steve, the simple fact, well, when it comes to this kind of stuff, you want a lab that everybody's familiar with. You want a company that's been around for a long time. You want to be able to go and check the parent website, not the reseller's website, but the parent website, see the product, see the certificates of analysis, see the test results. Literally, sometimes, Steve, even see photographs of the company building, the labs that they use, and the manufacturing process, videos and everything. This is exactly what the sort of stuff that we're looking for an approved source. And this is precisely why Geneza Pharma is one of those companies that we love and trust, Steve. Back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And really it's silly. You want to save $5 or $10 buying from a source, a buddy at the gym or something, or something like that. You know, you think they're doing you a favor by selling you their crappy gear? They're not. They're just trying to unload it on you because, you know, it's the gym. And that's how it is. People, they think they're cool, you know. Oh, I got some steroids, you know, buy it from me. Don't buy steroids from dudes at the gym. Don't buy steroids from steroid dealers, you know, go online and do it anonymously. So come on our forum, you check out Geneza Pharma, and you know you're getting good quality gear. Look, this is what the professionals use, as I said. Professional bodybuilders, former professional bodybuilders, current professional bodybuilders. This is the gear that they use. So you're able to get this. So this wasn't the case back in Mobster's days. That wasn't the case where you had access to the same stuff the pros did. They had it that way for a reason back then, because they wanted it all for themselves. It's like a fisherman. I went fishing over the weekend. It's like the fisherman, the captain. He comes back and people ask him, "Oh, did you guys catch anything?" The captain tells him, "No, I didn't catch nothing. We didn't catch anything." You know, he doesn't want you to know what he caught. He doesn't want to, you know, other people to hurt his business. So of course they're not going to say what they're using or what brand they're using. But now we know what the pros are using, and they're open about it. And they're saying, yeah, we use Geneza Pharma. It's no problem saying so. So it's not like Geneza Pharma is going to be out of stock of Equipoise. So it's not the case as it was back in Mobster's day. Now there's plenty of Equipoise to go around. They make plenty of it, and everyone can have their fair share of it, no problem. So let's get into the history of Equipoise, Mobster. So Equipoise, Boldenone, if you go on and check out Geneza, it's going to be listed under Boldenone. And it's also known as EQ. So if someone asks you, "Oh, what are you using?" and you say Equipoise, like, "Oh, you're using EQ." So EQ is a common name for it. Now, today it's a veterinarian steroid, and it was developed by SIBA, and it was supposed to be a form of long-acting injectable Dianabol. But as you're going to learn about Equipoise, it's not Dianabol at all, because it doesn't aromatize the way Dianabol does. So the intended use was in horse and cattle industry, and that's how, you know, it's used in the vet world today. Now, originally, it was human grade, so it was developed to help with muscle wasting, and that's a misconception that people will say. They'll say, "Oh, it's a vet steroid," and it wasn't. For 20 to 25 years, it was actually approved to be used in humans and prescribed for things like anemia, to boost red blood cell count, muscle wasting, and that sort of thing. But then once it was pulled from the market, now it's primarily used as a vet steroid. In fact, in countries like Australia, you can go to a vet store and purchase Equipoise. Granted, it's going to be in a very low milligram per milliliter, and you'd have to inject a lot of cc's of it to get any effect. So now a lot of sources like Geneza have come around. They're able to create Equipoise to be used in people. And in GP's situation, their GP is 300 milligrams per milliliter. So literally 1 cc of Equipoise is going to give you 300 milligrams of the steroid, which is a very good dose, even taken weekly. Really, you only need 1 or 2 cc's. We'll get into dosing later in the podcast. But the vet versions of the Equipoise, like in Australia, for example. Now, I've never been to Australia, but I know from people on the forums and people I know from Australia, they actually sell them in 50 milligram per milliliter. So you'd have to take 6 cc's to equal 1 cc from the Geneza Pharma. So now you see why it's more superior to go with the Geneza Pharma version versus going to a vet store and buying the veterinary grade Equipoise. Go ahead, Mobster.
Yeah. So this is just a quick aside here, guys. It's one of those things that when you first discover the veterinary sources, people go crazy. Let me give you an example, Steve. You can buy 1 liter, so that's 1,000 milliliters, or the equivalent of, I think, 100 vials, Steve. So 10 mil vials. Wow. But as Steve said, the dosage is unbelievably low. And I used to work in the meat processing industry. So we would talk to the delivery driver, Steve, when the meat was delivered to the factory. And that was my first job, unloading the trucks. And the quality control fella there also gave me some information. So essentially, these huge, great 1 liter bottles come with a great big, like, mechanical, not the syringe that you and I are familiar with, but a big stainless steel syringe and whatever else. And the idea is that they change the pin, the actual needle, every 10 animals or whatever else. That doesn't always happen. And as Steve said, you've got this huge, great thing. And then you look at the price and, the price is amazing. But then, like Steve says, it's 50 milligrams of effective product per milliliter. So you then start to go, hang on, this is no good. I'd have to inject multiple levels of milliliters just to get up to a performance enhancement type level. So just as I said, if you come across this, you go, it's amazing, Steve. It's a whole liter and it only costs a few $100. But yeah, it's not even close to the dosage or effective dosage that we would use for sports and performance enhancement, which is a great shame for obvious reasons. The other issue, of course, is proper veterinary products are not required to have the same hygiene or quality control levels. That's just the nature of the industry and the nature of the law. Proper companies that have been doing this stuff effectively for athletes have a certain standard that they like to adhere to, including obviously Geneza. And again, and I've used this analogy when it comes to the industry in general, and I'm talking about pharmaceutical industry. So I've said, for example, Steve, I'm not a fan of 400 and 500 milligram per mil products because huge pharmaceutical companies, billions of dollar pharmaceutical companies, do not produce products to that high of a potency because they never found a need for it and it didn't increase the effectiveness. So why is EQ at 300 milligrams? Because that's what works for 99.9% of our listeners will find at this dose, and especially like Steve says, we'll get into the dosing, cycling protocols, etc. This is what works, and that's the reason why it's 300 milligrams. And again, don't get too excited if you ever come across veterinary stuff, but there's a reason why we don't actually use that for the reasons I've already stated. Back to you, Steve.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more about the structure of Equipoise, so you understand really. I think it's confusing the way that people think about it, because if you never used it before and you see it on paper, hey, it's the same hormone as Dianabol, and and I've used both, and the results that you get on either are completely night and day. So we're going to kind of get into a little bit more about it. So now the Dianabol hormone, it's 17 alpha alkylated, and that's for oral use. It has an 8-hour half-life or less. Really, I've seen as low as 4 or 5 hour half-life. So Equipoise lacks the 17 alpha alkylated group. but it actually has a very long undecalenate ester chain. So when you use Equipoise, I call it the U ester, it's going to be in your system much longer than Dianabol. So it's one of the stark differences with both is Dianabol, really, you should be using it at least twice a day. Some people even go 3 times a day. Equipoise, you only have to inject this stuff once every week, once every 10 days, even once every 2 weeks. You can get away from with injecting Equipoise if you wanted to. So now the ester chains makes boldenone very oil soluble, and to the point where it's in a raw form, and before being suspended in oil, and it's got the consistency of a syrup. Historically, of course, labs like Geneza Pharma have changed that a little bit because they kind of create these steroids, and they suspend them in different oils and they experiment to give you a nice smooth injection. So it's one of the things I like about Dianabol is 300 milligrams per milliliter. You're pinning it. It's not going to give you a lot of post-injection pain or any post-injection pain. And that's really the nice thing about using something like Equipoise. So if it's a good one to use if you don't like to dose your anabolic steroids very often. So if you can pin 1 or 2 cc's, you can just load up a syringe with 2 cc's, right? Once every 10 days, and you're getting 600 milligrams in your system every 10 days. That's that's about 500 or 450 milligrams a week of the steroid. That's pretty good. Or you can load it up with 3 cc's, and you're getting a ton of Equipoise just from 1 3 cc dose every 2 weeks, and it'd still be consistently in your system because of that long half-life. So at the end of the day, the Equipoise, when you compare it to using Dianabol, it's just not comparable. And we'll get into side effects later in this episode, but a lot of people who use Dianabol, you're going to experience, I know, Mobster, you like Dianabol, and you can jump in as well. But when I run Dianabol, I get a crazy increase in appetite. Crazy. Some people report the same thing in Equipoise, but the vast majority of you who run Equipoise won't. And I would say 80% of you who use Equipoise won't notice a change in your appetite, but some of you will. Now, overall, will you get a benefit from Equipoise when it comes to appetite? Absolutely. It is a testosterone derivative, as Dianabol is. So you're going to get an appetite increase. Your body wants to grow when you use anabolic steroids, hence the name anabolic. So in that aspect, Equipoise makes an excellent bulking steroid, especially when you stack it with Dianabol or when you stack it with testosterone. We're going to get into how to stack it and how to dose it in a second here. But when it comes to Equipoise overall, it's going to do a lot of the things that Dianabol will do for you, that testosterone will do for you, but do it in a different way where it's a more clean bulk. So if you're looking for a clean bulk, Equipoise is better than testosterone or Dianabol. So that kind of starts our next segment about bulking on Equipoise and why bulking on Equipoise is such a good idea. At the end of the day, when you're using these anabolic steroids, they do things in your body that aren't possible without them. And I'll give you an example with Equipoise. Let's say I run Equipoise, your red blood cell count is going to go up as it does on any anabolic steroid, but Equipoise does it really good. And when your red blood cell count goes up, you're going to be able to push more in the gym. You're going to be able to really wear out those muscles more in the gym. You're going to get more recovery from your workouts. That's what Equipoise is really good for. In turn, it's going to be easier to build muscle. And in turn, it's going to be easier to bulk on Equipoise. Another nice benefit is the effect that Equipoise has on lowering your sex hormone binding globulin. I've talked about this before in the past. Some steroids are really, really good at it. Some steroids are decent at it, and some steroids aren't so good at it. Equipoise is somewhere in the middle. So you're going to get a nice effect. It's not going to be a DHT derivative effect where they really bind well to SHBG, but you're still going to have an SHBG effect where it's going to bind to SHBG, drive that down, and that's going to kind of break down the barrier for you to build muscle. So Equipoise does a lot of things. The third thing, protein synthesis. It's going to do an incredibly good job at boosting protein synthesis in the body. When that happens, you're able to better take advantage of your workouts. You're better to take advantage of your diet. And we're going to get into diet and training here on one of the next segments. But at the end of the day, it's going to make everything you do more, more easily attainable. So when it comes to bulking, you're going to have an easier time to bulk up with good quality muscle mass when you're using Equipoise versus not using Equipoise. And it's going to be a clean bulk on Equipoise. As I said, when you run Dianabol, what's the problem with Dianabol? You're going to aromatize a lot very, very quickly. As soon as you start taking that Dianabol, within hours, it's aromatizing the estrogen in your body, creating a lot of water retention and a rise in estrogen. And that's going to cause a lot of bloat. So you're going to bulk up a lot of water weight on Dianabol. But with Equipoise, because it doesn't aromatize rapidly, remember the way when I talked about the way its ester was designed and the way the ester chain is designed, the enzymes in your liver cleave off the ester chain from the boldenone hormone, and it sets it free so it can interact with androgen receptors in your muscle cells. And it does that without aromatizing into estrogen at the same time, like Dianabol will and like testosterone will. So if you're looking for a clean bulk, more lean muscle mass versus packing on a bunch of water weight, then Equipoise is the perfect steroid for you when it comes to bulking for that reason. Who wants to blow it up? Who wants to get moon face? You take Dianabol, you get moon face, your face turns into a big circle. Who wants that? This is why Equipoise is loved by a lot of people like me over Dianabol and over testosterone for that reason. And I will pick Equipoise over Dianabol and testosterone any day for bulking for that reason specifically. Go ahead, Mobster.
Yeah, I want to do a couple of thoughts here. One is specifically, what do we mean by bulking? So bulking, guys, you've got what we, in very, very simple bodybuilding training terms, a cut is when we're looking to get into shape. I won't say lose weight, Steve, because lose weight might include muscle. So more definitively, we want to lose fat. A bulk is the opposite. And you and I have had this debate before, and I think you and I actually agree on this. You can bulk, meaning adding muscle and fat, but actually long term, we would prefer you to lean bulk, because you're only going to end up, and I've seen it so many times, the guys, where they add the combination of muscle and fat, and then they end up realizing that they actually want to lose the fat. So lean bulk's better. EQ, Geneza EQ, Steve, is perfect for this in that particular regards, because the muscle that you're going to gain, if everything's on point, and we're going to get into that, should be quality muscle. Why is it preferred by bodybuilders? And I want to touch also on what Steve's just been talking about, that sense, right? So certain medications, never mind anabolic steroids, can give you, simulate, and they give you a sense of energy. But why do you therefore feel better on EQ? Well, when Steve talked about red blood cell count, what that happens means it is carrying more oxygen in the blood. And of course, more oxygen means you're less fatigued in the gym. This is something that people sometimes struggle with the idea of, and they can't get their heads around it, Steve. So, listen, you should be training your fucking asses off, and then an anabolic steroid can give you what feels like a sense of energy. Now, it's not a stimulant. It's not caffeine. It's not out there. It's not speed. It's not something like that. But it gives you a sense of energy because you have the ability to do more reps, the ability to do more sets. Steve, I know, and I've just figured back in the day when I wasn't using anything, and I was running as well as training, and my recovery was so crazy that I could train in the morning and feel like I could go back and train again in the afternoon with the same amount of energy. And that was, of course, when I was 17, 18, 19, 20 years of age. Sometimes when people have never used steroids before, and I'm thinking specifically today of EQ, of course, Equipoise, that sense of energy, that sense of recovery that comes from that is amazing. Now, another reason, and I want to talk about this as well, why it can actually be used for a cut, because again, you still got that sense of energy, although you have to watch the appetite, Steve, and that's where tweaking the dose could come in. But also, and Steve touched on this right at the beginning of the show, I believe, when he talks about lifters like myself, and as it's actually a great alternative to Deca. Some people struggle with Decadurobin side effects, and EQ seems to negate some of those side effects and yet still give lifters, powerlifters, not bodybuilders like myself, that little bit more power. I think it would be like the injectable version of Anavar, Stephen, when you're not, unless more specifically like today, that you're looking to bulk, you had a little bit of muscle, but your strength goes up. Your training is getting to that place where it's super crazy, super hard, and you're able to put more work in. You're able to keep the volume going, even though the weights have increased. And that, again, is great for a strength athlete, a lifter like myself, as well as a bodybuilder, because the bodybuilders, of course, typically go for a much higher level of volume. But I think it's that sense, Steve, and I made a comment here of EQ doesn't quite give you that sense of well-being that some people talk about on the bulk, but you definitely have a sense of energy and capability. Imagine you're at a point in your training program just before you introduce EQ. It's just starting to get hard, Steve. You've got another few weeks, which is part of the cycle, that you're absolutely going to kill it. Without performance enhancing drugs, that would be super, super difficult. I've described feeling like an old, beaten up old man, Steve, towards the end of a training program, because I deliberately needed to be in that particular place, that sense of working my fucking arse off, and no one in the gym was out training me. No one I was going to compete against and put the work in that I put the work with. EQ enables you to put that work in at that point where you're training your asses off. That's what should happen. We'll touch on this very quickly, Steve. Don't train hard just when you're on anabolics. Train hard off anabolics and then allow anabolics like Geneza Pharma's EQ to boost you into that crazy new place with the more muscle, the more strength, the leaner look, etc., etc., etc. So there's that particular aspect. I think on the bulking thing specifically, Steve, and I want to touch on the training here as well. We will talk about dosing and training specifically, but again, guys, when I'm bulking, and I will touch on this properly in a little while, I want my training to be as specifically direct as it possibly can. I will take out, and I'm doing this right now, Steve, all the superfluous stuff, all the little bits and pieces. For me, a bulk should be as stripped away as possible, and that the really big, heavy compound exercises are the particular focus. Now, I'm going to touch on, as I said momentarily, when I'm going to talk about the actual training, the sets, the reps, and volume. But for example, Steve, if I was a cut for me, and it doesn't have to be this way, guys, but a cut for me should involve more cardio. It should involve a much stricter diet. I should be controlling my macros specifically. If I haven't already eaten healthily, I should be eating super healthily, and so on and so forth. And therefore, everything, again, would be super controlled, and I can monitor my body weight, monitor my response, and so on and so forth. Bulking is almost the other direction, in that I don't have to worry too much about the macros. In fact, quite the opposite sometimes. But I don't want to go too far down the road of dirty bulk, Steve, where you're literally eating everything. I'm thinking of another podcast just recently where there's a strength athlete who I shan't name was eating 20,000 calories a day just because. Guys, yeah, that way you're just going to get absolutely crazy fat. And in reality, we want you to be using Geneza Pharma's EQ because we want you to gain good quality muscle. It's the bulking, if you like, is the opportunity to add tissue, healthy tissue, rather than strip away any superfluous fluff or fat or chub or whatever you want to call it. A cut is chiseling away to show the details. A bulk is putting on that muscle, building up the power, and getting the stuff underneath the fluff ready to be displayed. What do you think on that, Steve, before we carry on?
Yeah, so it's a lot of things. I could let me kind of summarize it like this. So the reason on Equipoise you're going to get a lot of good benefits, like in the gym, when you're working out, when you're doing cardio and all that stuff, versus running Dianabol, okay, which is what people think. Now, ignorant people out there, I've heard them say this in the past, like, oh, Equipoise is just injectable Dianabol. It's the same thing, so might as well just take oral Dianabol. I've heard dummies say that over the years. And these are people that don't understand the way the body is. They've never tried it. They don't use it, so they're kind of ignorant. And then they'll say on the side, oh, I don't use vet steroids. They'll say that in the same breath. Like, okay, but Dianabol isn't a vet steroid. But you just said that Dianabol is Equipoise in injectable form, but then you're saying you won't use vet steroids, but you'll use Dianabol. So it doesn't really make sense. So I get the confusion. That's why we do these podcasts, Mobster and I, to clear up the confusion. So let me kind of summarize it like this. Imagine if you're a big fan of testosterone or you're a big fan of Dianabol, going to the gym, and instead of having those negative side effects, the pumps that you get from Dianabol, those nasty, nasty pumps that you get, but you're not going to get that on Equipoise. What about endurance? Go try running on testosterone or Dianabol. The androgenic side effects of those two, and the water retention on those two, you're not going to get that on Equipoise. So when you go running, you're going to get the benefits of high red blood cell count. You're going to get the benefits of more protein synthesis. You're going to get the benefits of more recovery, but you're not going to have the negatives that come with it. Try running holding 2 gallons of water or water in a backpack. Try running with that. It's going to suck, okay? It's going to take a lot out of you, right? But on Equipoise, you don't got to worry about the water retention on Equipoise because you don't have that aromatization. It's a slow aromatization where it's not a factor. So when you use Equipoise, you're not getting that water weight. You're not getting those pumps either. But if you run Dianabol and you go try to run a mile, your calves are going to swell up like crazy, and it's going to be a nasty pump that you get. But Equipoise, that doesn't happen. So at the end of the day, it's a really, really good steroid, and it has a lot of benefits that a lot of you will be searching for out there, and it's great for bulking. It's absolutely wonderful for it because it's good, clean bulking, and it's not going to cause side effects. A lot of people think, oh my God, Equipoise causes side effects. It doesn't, because you're not getting those androgenic effects like you are with testosterone and Dianabol. You're not getting the pumps. You're not getting the water retention. You're not putting yourself at risk for gynecomastia, bitch tits. You're not putting yourself at risk for higher blood pressure because it doesn't cause that water retention. So you get all the good things that you would be getting from Dianabol or testosterone without many of the bad things that come with it. But at the end of the day, if you're looking to just dirty bulk, Equipoise may not be the run for you. But that's not the way Mobster and I teach it. We don't teach dirty bulking. We teach good, clean bulking. So I would summarize that Equipoise is the one to use. If you want to do a clean bulk, where you're going to putting on good, clean muscle mass, then the Equipoise is definitely the one you want to do for sure. All right, so how to dose and cycle it. This is a good one. This is a good topic too. So Geneza Pharma's Equipoise comes in 300 milligram per milliliter, as I've said a couple times already. So really, any dosage between 300 and 600 is a nice moderate dose. So you can run anywhere from 1 to 2 cc's per week of Equipoise. You're good to go. That's all you got to do. Now, you can also run more. Some guys run, like we see guys who do professional bodybuilding, physique competitors, they use a shit ton of Equipoise. We did a podcast on the gentleman who had passed away, Mobster, George Peterson. Before his competition, he was doing a physique competition, right? He's one of the top physique competitors, passed away. He did an autopsy, and in the autopsy, they identified which steroids was in the system. Guess which one he was using a shit ton of? Equipoise. So Equipoise is used by professional bodybuilders for a reason. All the reasons I already talked about, but they use a shit ton of it. He was using 2 to 3 grams of it per week. So they abuse the shit out of it. So obviously Equipoise, yeah, if you abuse the shit of Equipoise and abuse all the other stuff he was using with it, which he was using a shit ton of other steroids. There was like 5-6 steroids he was using. Equipoise being one of them. I think the highest dose steroid in his stack was Equipoise itself. But yeah, obviously, you'll give yourself a stroke if you're using 2 grams of Equipoise, 3 grams of Equipoise, and 5 or 6 other steroids and diuretics and the stimulants and the clan and all the other stuff that these guys use. But this shows you that they love Equipoise. Why? Because it gives you a nice, clean bulk where your muscles get bigger and you could show off your body. All right. So that's why Equipoise is so damn popular. And so guys will dose it over 1,000 milligrams, no problem. But for you, normal gym rats, which is going to be 99% of you out there, 300 to 600 milligrams is the sweet spot. Even 500 milligrams is the sweet spot, right on the money. So you don't need much. And as I said earlier in the podcast, you don't got to inject this very much, because 1 cc of Geneza Pharma GP Bold 300 is going to give you 300 milligrams. So that's the beauty part of it. So if you don't like injections like me, then this will work beautifully for you. So that's the way I would use it. And let's talk about what to stack with. Touch on that, Mobster, and let's talk about what to stack with it and how long to run Equipoise, because that's another one that gets debated a lot.
Yeah, I think on its own, Steve, do you know what? I don't think I'd go over 600 milligrams a week. In fact, only because I'm running probably the most I've ever run in my life, which is slightly over a gram total. Typically, I'd run less. So I'm looking at the numbers here, Steve, and I think 450 milligrams, 1.5 mil a week, 1 pin, because of the half-life being so long, would be perfect. Honestly, guys, you could probably pin 600 milligrams every 10 days or something, and that works out to around the 450, 500 milligrams ish, kind of sort of in that area, kind of per week. As something on this particular thing, guys, and it's just as an aside again, in terms of the whole training, bulking, whatever, I almost sometimes throw the whole 7-day week thing out. Okay, so I actually sometimes have to get the calculator out, Steve, and work out what I'm doing per week, just because I get asked what I'm doing per week. Whereas what I'm really doing, for example, with the products I'm running right now, it's every 4 days. So it's not like how many times a week, it's once a week, but it works out to be every 8 or 9 days between pins. Overall, EQ's got such a long half-life, literally 1 pin, 1.5 mil, 450-ish would be absolutely perfect. I will touch on for myself, Steve, because that's what we're going to go into now. And I'm looking at the article that we're going to associate with this podcast for you guys. I think an absolutely perfect stack for a bulk, ironically, given the original reason why EQ was created as a replacement for D-Bowl, but in reality, as we've just said, it really isn't a liquid D-Bowl, would be D-Bowl. I would literally put that in there, Steve. I would run the, and again, I'm a super fan of low dosages. So listeners, if you've got an opinion on what you believe to be a more effective dose, please comment. But again, for me, in this particular example, Steve, 30 milligrams D-Bowl and 1.5 mil, 450 milligrams of Geneza Pharma 300. Perfect. That's real simple. Now, you can obviously tweak the numbers. I wouldn't want to, for example, Steve, go over 50 milligrams on the D-Bowl. Because we're talking about harsh orals. Yes, pros might be doing 100 milligrams. But again, this is majority of our listeners. And certainly, I would not go anywhere near, for me, 1,000 milligrams. I think the upper limit for me would be the 600 milligrams that we discussed already. What about you in terms of stacking for a bulk from Geneza Pharma?
Yeah, and if you don't want to add any other injectable, I think that's a great option. Adding some Dianabol to it, give it a little androgenic kick to the cycle. Another option too, obviously, is testosterone. And a lot of guys will choose, most of you out there, 60-70% of you will choose to stack in testosterone with Equipoise for a nice bulk. And you can stack in anywhere from 100 to 200 to more of testosterone. Now, keep in mind, the more testosterone you add, the more aromatization you're going to get. So you want to be adding, if you add testosterone at a moderate or high dose, you obviously need to also add an aromatase inhibitor. Aromacin or Arimidex are the two that I recommend in that order. This way you're controlling estrogen. Yes, we want to bulk, but we don't want to get incredible estrogenic side effects. We don't want to get the bitch tits. We don't want to get the water retention. We don't want to get high blood pressure, the insomnia, because in the end, that will cause more harm than good. So there is a difference between bulking with a bunch of water weight and bulking properly. So we want to bulk properly always when we bulk. Go ahead, Mobster.
Right. So I want to cover this point, and I know I touched on it earlier on, guys. And this is purely to do with the psychology of athletes. And I'm probably oversimplifying this because I'm keeping it so short. So what do we see? Novices, noobs, people that perhaps haven't experienced come on the forums and they say, I want to bulk. And then quite often, Steve, they're underweight. And sometimes I'm like, just fix your diet, guys. You're 15, 20 pounds underweight, fix your diet. But if you've been training for a while, if you've added some muscle and you decided now's the time to put on more muscle, here's what sometimes happens. And this is specifically what Steve's on about when we talk about lean bulking versus dirty bulking. So you've got a 6-pack, maybe a 4-pack. There's certainly abs visible. You decide to bulk and you up your calories. Let's say, for example, Steve, they put another 1,000 calories a day in. That's quite a lot, to be honest. And the abs disappear. And they're up 6, 7, 8 pounds, Steve, 4 or 5 weeks in. This is great, fantastic. But then they start to look in the mirror and they go, oh man, my abs have disappeared. That little definition in my chest is gone. So the psychology is like, oh, I've actually changed my mind. I don't want to bulk. No, you do want to bulk. You want it to add 3, 4, 5 pounds of beautiful muscular tissue. What you didn't want was slabs of fat hiding that definition. You kind of still wanted to see your top row of abs. You kind of still wanted to see the separation in your muscles. This is why we recommend what we call a lean bulk. And EQ is absolutely perfect, especially from Geneza, Steve. I want you, when you're bulking, to add a little tiny bit of water. I mean, a tiny bit, Steve. Like I said, if you can see a 4-pack, I want you to see a 2. If you can see a 6, I want you to see a 4. I want you to lose a little bit of definition. But what you're only doing that because it's that much easier to add muscle at the same time rather than being super lean and trying to add muscle tissue. This is why we're okay with bulking, but lean bulking, 4 or 5 pounds of useful muscle where you can still see separation. You can actually see where the muscle's gone. Your shoulders are more capped. Your legs are filling out those trousers more. Your waist has stayed kind of tight. You can still see, like I said, a top row of abs. That's kind of where you really want to be. And it doesn't mess with your head. So let me get into now, Steve. I'm going to talk about the diet specifically in the training. Now, I said 1,000 calories just now. That was an example. In reality, you don't actually have to have loads and loads more food. Now, as an example, real simple, adding 1 clean meal. I mean, guys, we talk about meal prep on other podcasts. If you are the kind of athlete that goes around with a Tupperware tub for your breakfast, for your lunch, for your dinner, for whatever, 1 more Tupperware tub, 500, 600, 700 more calories per day over the week, over the course of a cycle is enough for you to put on 3, 4, 5 pounds of tissue. Steve and I have talked about this before. 5 pounds is a lot of meat. It is a lot of new tissue. So don't go crazy. You don't have to eat crap. You don't have to do if it fits your macros. I would much rather you had some more beef patties, another portion of vegetables, and I know Steve's not a big fan of this, just having another protein shake. Literally, these things are enough over the weeks. Let's say, for example, Steve, an 8-week cycle for you to add at least 3 to 4 pounds of tissue on a typical listener. Some of you might gain a little bit more, which would be absolutely amazing. And trust me, if it was, for example, as 5 pounds, Steve, and you did 2 cycles a year, that's 10 pounds of muscle per year, which is amazing. Now, for me, and I'm doing a bulk right now myself, my training gets stripped right the fuck down, Steve. If I was doing for me, volume is kind of low anyway. That's the way that I lift. But I was doing a slightly higher volume recently when I was cutting, and also slightly higher volume. For me, a slightly higher volume is like 12 reps on legs. For you guys, it might be 15 to 20. Right now, I've stripped that back. Now, this is what works for me, so you adjust the numbers to what works for you. but it would be, for example, Steve, big, heavy fucking squats. And I'm not going to go over 8 reps. I've like a number in the back of my mind that's absolutely crazy, but crazy for you versus crazy for me. Benching, you can do all different kinds of benching. But guys, if you're doing 20 or 30 sets normally, if you're doing 4 or 5 exercises, I want you to strip that bollocks back to 3 exercises, 2 maybe, and do them hard, 5, 6 sets of each, but really pushing the numbers. Think thickened muscle fibers. Think more meat on your chest. The same applies to your back, your arms, whatever. So, for example, Steve, straightforward pressing for shoulders, benching, or some sort of machine bench, or heavy dumbbells, or heavy flyers, but keeping it again to 2 or 3 exercises. Same thing for your back, and same thing for the rest of your body. All of these kind of stuff. Split body, you can get real complicated with the splits, the push pulls, and all the rest of that stuff. But take out the fluff. Make sure that the compounds are number 1 exercise. And more than anything else, Steve, try to add weight to the bar. And again, this is relative. You don't have to be doing 500-pound bench presses. If 200 is your bench press, I want you at the end of the cycle to be doing 210, 215. You will add more muscle. If you're doing multiple chest exercises, like I said, 5, and you strip it back to 3, but you're working really, really hard, I want you to get stronger on those 3 exercises. And again, relative to your strength. What do you do, Steve, when you're bulking, diet and or training wise?
So I don't believe in dirty bulking at all. I've done it before. Look, at the end of the day, all you're going to do is get fat. And not only are you going to get fat, it's going to get harder. You're going to get more insulin resistant. It's going to be harder to lose that fat in the future, because there's going to become a time where you're like, shit, I want to lose that fat back. You're going to make it harder on yourself. So for me, clean bulking is the best way to do it. That's the long-term best way. And it's good, clean food, good, nutritious food. We have logs on, if you go to evolutionary.org, we've got tons of logs from people. And a lot of people, they start their logs off and they're talking about their diet. And their diet is just full of, I call it kiddie food, or I call it junk food. All right. It's got things like cereal in it. They've got things like, things out of packages. It's just eating out, restaurant food, fast food, stuff like that. And they're like, well, Steve, I'm bulking. Why can't I go eat fast food? Why can't I go eat at a restaurant? Why can't I eat things out of packages? I'm bulking. What does it matter? It matters because these aren't the types of foods that are going to feed your muscles. These aren't nutritious foods. These aren't the foods that are full of vitamins and minerals. On the contrary, they actually seep your body of what they need in the process. So we want to stick to good quality whole food options. If it's something made in a factory, don't eat it. It's got to be something natural, guys. You got to be consuming your fruits, your vegetables, your good quality meats, the grass-fed beef, okay? Good quality beef. You're not going to be able to go get that from Walmart, okay? You have to go to a good place to get your, either a local butcher or a health food store like a Whole Foods or something like that. Those are the places that you get good quality meats, all right? You're not going to be able to go and buy fish, frozen fish, at the supermarket. You've got, if you can't access fresh fish from a fish market or go catch it yourself or something like that, don't even bother, because frozen fish, it's been frozen. They add preservatives to it. Frozen chicken, same thing. Oh my gosh. One time I bought frozen chicken. I brought it home and I looked at the ingredients and I was shocked at what they're putting in this. Anything they can put in there to preserve it, make it last longer so it doesn't spoil on the shelf, is what they're going to do. And look, at the end of the day, I get it. They don't want foodborne illnesses. They don't want you to get food poisoning. So they have to add these preservatives, but they go the cheap route on preservatives. They're not using the sea salt to preserve it. They're not using natural things to preserve it that our ancestors used. They're using the nitrates. They're using a lot of these additives to preserve it. And these things go in your body and they make your body sick. And if your body is sick, you're not going to grow muscle as efficiently as you can. So you want to make sure you're eating clean, organic as much as possible, hormone-free as much as possible. You want to be putting good, clean food in your body, and that's how you're going to bulk properly. That's how you're going to grow. So I'll give you an example before I bring you in, Mobster. Here's an example of a good quality meal. some grass-fed beef or hormone-free chicken with broccoli and brown rice. Or you can swap out the brown rice for a sweet potato. Boom. That's a muscle building meal right there, versus going to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or Burger King after your workout and stressing out your body more by putting garbage food into it. Does that make sense? So it's very, very important to make sure that you're putting good quality food, nothing to stress your body out, nothing that's going to affect your sleep. And sleeping is how you're going to grow. That's how you bulk. When you sleep at night, that's how your body recovers itself, repairs itself, and that's when your muscles actually grow. You know, we've heard that cliche, you actually grow while you're sleeping. And it's true, you do. So it's important not to eat garbage before bed. This way, at night, you're tossing and turning. Oh, my stomach hurts. I'm cramping up. My stomach is cramping up. Well, if you can't sleep good, then you're not going to grow. So, what you put in your body matters. Everything you put in your body matters. Stick to good quality foods. And that's going to help you bulk the right way, and you're going to bulk way more muscle than normal. Mobster?
Yeah, here in the UK, Steve, and I think you've got some companies like that in the US, and I'm going to give you a couple of tips here, guys, as well. Right, so here in the UK, there's two companies I can think of at least right now that specifically deal in what we would call muscle meats. And one's got a very similar name to that. I'm not going to name them, but a very similar name to that. And they will literally deliver to your door within, I think, 24, 36 hours. It's frozen when it leaves. It's well packed, etc. And it arrives. They've got organic stuff there. Steve's big on organics. I think organic's amazing. I'm thinking of other companies which are award-winning butchers that do stuff by mouth. We've got 2 or 3 companies. They're actually ran by, I think one example is by a very well-known UK chef. And again, you look at the photographs, you look at the product, you think, and that's a dry age, it's beautiful pieces of steak and so on. Something else, Steve, and I'm thinking, funny enough, of Jay Cutler back in the day, and this is when Jay was doing 7 meals and all that kind of stuff. So Jay was bulking for sure. Right now, guys, you don't need to have 7 meals. That's a bit silly. 4 meals, 5 meals. And again, 3 of those should be proper meals, and 1 be a high protein, quality, extra. This is where you're going to get the bulk from. That's going to be an addition to what was keeping you where you was. So, for example, Steve, recommendations, and this especially works if you don't live in a big city, if you've actually got a town with butchers and what we will say over here, greengrocers and so on. Have a working relationship. Don't just walk in and haggle, but go in on a regular basis and buy for these people anyway from your local vegetable shop, grocers, from your local butchers, if you have one. And it's especially true in the smaller towns and the smaller cities, Steve. It's worth the effort of driving down it. What did Jay do? Jay was buying half a fucking cow at a time, Steve. I've got 2 of those small chest freezers here. Jay had one of the big motherfuckers, the full like 200, 300 litre chest freezers, Steve. When you go out, there are farms nearby. I can buy a whole lamb, spring lamb, but go on when a time of year they tell you on Facebook, and you literally go off and buy a whole lamb. Jay was buying half a cow at a time, and because you're buying half a cow at a time and it's a quality piece of meat, they will cut it how you want it. I literally know a strength athlete who goes to the farms and slaughters those animals and cuts. He's a master butcher. There is another company local to where I live, Steve, that delivers meat. I've used it multiple times, especially during lockdown, to get high quality meat delivered. And it's actually, I think, they still do a protein pack for local athletes, for rugby players, for bodybuilders. Now, if you do business with these people, the vegetable companies, etc., the vegetable shops, the grocers, on a regular basis, you can start to ask. They take an interest. So if Steve and I was doing what I'm talking about, we'd be able to walk in and say, listen, guys, I'm going to do a bulk. Can we do a deal on more sweet potatoes? Can we do a deal on another bag of turkey mince? Can we do? And they will do it, Steve. I've done. Listen, when I was getting this stuff on a regular basis, I bought some for myself and I was buying some for my buddies, and I would get money knocked off. So not only was I getting great meat, great product, great whatever, I was saving more money because I was giving them £100, $120 or whatever at a time. Now, I know because I've seen some of the American prices recently, Steve, even in Walmart or whatever, your prices are getting crazy in the States, crazy. So any way that you can save money, get high quality, organic, locally produced products, and you can do a deal and have that company support you with your journey, because you're now an athlete, you might be playing baseball, you might be playing basketball, you might be a bodybuilder. Now they're supporting you. Hell, guys, who knows? It could lead to sponsorship. They might start putting extra products in your packages when they're delivered because they're supporting your journey. That's the relationship you can end up with. And if that doesn't help you bulk, free food, Steve, free organic, high quality, locally produced food. Hell, Steve, you can ask them to age the meat. Can you give me the 28-day age? Can you give me the 14-day age steaks? That kind of stuff, because you are giving them money, you are paying their bills. And that relationship is a lot easier with local small businesses, with local high quality product than it is with a much bigger business. The alternative, of course, Steve, is Costco or similar, Macro, Costco, whatever else. And again, you see a lot of bodybuilders do this. They've done the video, they go there, and they literally fill up their trolley, and it is pounds and pounds and pounds of meat. So get yourself one of them big freezers. Let's talk about side effects, Steve, and any of the negatives that are possible with EQ before we finish off.
So obviously with all anabolic steroids, Equipoise, it's going to suppress you. It's going to shut you down. So you want to make sure you have a post-cycle therapy in place. Geneza Pharma, they got you covered on that. They have all the PCT products that you need, the Novadex, the Clomid, they've got everything. So you don't have to worry. You just want to make sure you get your PCT in place. Now, in terms of how long to run Equipoise, that's going to affect how long it takes you to recover. So with Equipoise, you got to remember it's a long ester. So you've got to be on it a minimum of 6 or 7 weeks before you're really going to get to the cream of the crop of your cycle. So the problem is, once you pass 12 weeks on steroids, it becomes harder to recover. So you want to keep that in mind. And because Equipoise has that long ester and long half-life, it's going to be in your system longer once you come off. So add 6-7 weeks to a 12-week cycle. Now you're talking about you're on almost 20 weeks where you're shut down. So you want to make sure you time your PCT properly. That's the number one problem with people who use Equipoise. They run their PCT too short, and then they come off PCT, and that's when the Equipoise is leaving your system. So you want to make sure that you keep your cycle, to 12 weeks. Now, a lot of people say, oh, Steve, you're wrong. You need to run Equipoise 14 weeks, 16 weeks, 18 weeks, even 20 weeks. Well, the problem with that is it's going to be difficult for you to recover after that. It's going to be difficult. So I'd rather you cut the cycle a little short and leave some gains on the table, but be able to recover properly, than run it for 20 weeks and then have a hell of a time recovering. So look, that's just me. If you want to be a hero and you want to go 20 weeks, guess what? You're really going 27 weeks. You're going to be on steroids down real half the year. That's a 6-month cycle if you do something like that. And that's going to be hard to recover from. So you need to be smart when you're using these anabolic steroids. Make sure you run your support supplements as well on cycle, because all anabolic steroids do hit your liver in some capacity, some more than others. Equipoise isn't that bad, but you still want to use a support supplement to help with your heart, your liver, your kidneys, everything else in your body. So that pretty much covers it. But Equipoise really overall has much lower side effects than some of these other steroids that guys are using out there. So that pretty much covers it. Mobster, finish out the show and take us on a disclaimer. I think it was a good one.
Yeah, I can think of one more negative, guys, and then I'm going to talk about positive. So one more negative is it will show up if you're tested for ages. Steve just told you about how long it's in your system. It can show up in tests for years. I'm thinking minimum 2 years here, Steve. So if you are a tested athlete, keep that in mind. On the other hand, positive, it is an incredibly versatile drug, useful for strength, great for cutting, although you have to watch the dosing for the diet side of it in terms of getting the appetite, but also a great bulker. Super versatile. Geneza Pharma EQ, Steve. So yeah, guys, give us your feedback as always. We all want to see your comments. If you disagree with our dosing and protocols, by all means, jump in and give us some suggestions. Let's see what you think. Have you used EQ? How did you get on with it? Have you used Geneza product? Do you like Geneza? We want all your feedback and more. Please note, we are not doctors and opinions. Ours is our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast of informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.